Hi everybody and welcome back to Borderline. So today we'd thought we'd speak to you about the good old things, which is unemployment, average wages and house prices, specifically in the northeast, because we had a comment by a gentleman who basically said the reason that Hull's so cheap is that there's no jobs in the area, unemployment's high, and housing which is there is basically trash. Okay, that's not their words, that's my words. Okay, I thought I'd put it a slightly meaner way. And that it was like an hour and 10 minutes to get to Leeds. So we thought, right, let's go and take a 75-minute trip around from Hull to big cities or places where there's going to be housing and jobs available and see what's available. Okay, as in, what is the unemployment rates like? What are the average wages and what house prices like? Okay, so if you take, for instance, Hull, okay, Hull's unemployment rate is only 3%. Okay, their actual unemployment rate is better than actually the national average. Okay, well, because if you take, for instance, Birmingham, okay, Birmingham's unemployment rate is at 14%. Okay, so if you take it by that, and Birmingham is nowhere near the highest, trust me. And as it happens, the place with the highest, or one of the highest unemployment rates, is actually in Lincolnshire, so it's not that far away. Okay, and the national unemployment average, I think it's around about 7-8%, which I'm just going to double check if I can quickly find it, which I can't at the moment. You know, so it's not that bad, and if you actually look within the radius, most places around that kind of figure, you're looking at around about 3 to 3.5%. So Hull's at 3%. We'll forget about Grimsby because I know what that is. You know, Scunthorpe, 2.8%. Doncaster, 3.2%. Rotherham, 3.3%. Leeds, in the radius, is at 3.5%. So out of them ones, it's the highest. Now, there was a reason I skipped Grimsby, because it's one of them things with the northeast, and for a southerner, somebody who's always lived in the south, people are going to throw at me and say, yeah, but you buy land in north-south divide, you know, all the jobs go down south, which there's an argument for. I'm not going to dispute that. Okay, now the problem for Grimsby is they got battered by the decline of fishing. So Grimsby's unemployment rate from 16-year-olds to 64-year-olds is 53%. 53%. That's basically over half of the population of Grimsby is unemployed, which is absolutely mad. You know, and Grimsby's only about 40 minutes away from Hull by car. Okay, but on the other flip side of the coin, okay, you got Beverley, which is like half an hour away. I think it's about 10 miles away. Okay, unemployment rate of only 2.2%. York, which is just over an hour away, 2.2% as well. So if you look at the area or the region, unemployment's not that bad. If you forget about Grimsby, and I'm sorry for all those people that live in Grimsby for saying it, if you forget about that, unemployment's not that bad. So then you look at the average wages. Now, Hull, out of all of those places, has the lowest wage, but not by a lot. So the average wage in Hull is £29,000. I think the national average, if you're working a 39-hour week, is about £19,000-20,000 it works out. Okay, if you're on minimum wage and you're working 39 hours a week, it's around about that kind of figure. So it's only at 29k. So it's not a massive wage at the end of the day. I think that's round about what nurses get paid roughly. They may get a little bit more, but if you look at across the rest of the region, apart from York, okay, you're looking at around about 35 to 37,000 pounds. Apart from Leeds, which is at 42, and York yet again just slightly above Hull, which is at 29,000 pounds. Okay, so most of the wages, there's not a lot in it, which is when you go and look at housing. Okay, yet again, Grimsby comes at the bottom. But why? Because there's a massive difference of how much a 3-bedroom house costs across the region. Now, you could argue, and this is an argument, okay, but Grimsby is at £76,000. That's the average cost. Then it's at Scunthorpe at 118 grand. Okay, so it's a massive difference. You're talking about £40,000. Now, the argument I would put forward is high unemployment, no jobs available. People are going to be claiming benefits, can't afford to buy houses. So what's going to happen? House prices are going to tank. It's just a reality. It's one of the fundamental problems of the North East over the last 40 years. The decline in industry, the decline in fishing. Two of the biggest employers, yes, you got Nissan up in the northeast as well, but they're two of the biggest things that have hit, and Grimsby's a classic case in point. Okay, so, but if you look at everywhere else, there's next to nothing in it. So to put this argument that Hull has poor housing, has the fundamental problem of to do with our housing. Fundamental problem is one, government, as in national government, refusal to invest. Number two is local government, as in the local council, and you could put that bench, I'm sorry to say this, especially for somebody who votes Conservative, on Margaret Thatcher. Because what did Margaret Thatcher do? She let local councils sell their properties on the right to buy, and they were not allowed to reinvest that money, which should have never happened. So the fundamental thing that needs to happen, which isn't actually going to happen no matter what Labour say, is reinvestment in building more properties, decent properties. And then the other thing, which is something that he led on, was landlords. Landlords should be made to keep properties up to a certain standard. There was the outcry not long ago about the Labour MP who owned a load of properties and they were in an absolute disgraceful condition, but was alleged, and it was proven to be the case. I never saw them, but it was proven to be the case. Why should landlords be able to rent properties out with mould in, all this kind of stuff, in an absolute state, and be able to get away with it? They shouldn't be able to. And then you're not going to have people like this gentleman who's gone and said what he said about the properties in Hull. Now, I'm going to take his word for it, but he's telling the truth. But if some rule got brought in, this wouldn't happen. So standards can go up. But if that goes and happens, what's going to happen? Prices will rise. Fundamentally, that's what will happen. If a landlord's forced into spending more money, he ain't going to do it just out of the love of it. He's going to want a return on his investment at the end of the day. So you've got to expect that. But it's no different to if you're living in a place which is in a poor state. You don't expect to pay a lot of money. It's going to be cheap at the end of the day. You know, and that is the reality of the situation. So is Hull really that bad? I would suggest not, because if you go and look at it, wages, there's not a lot of difference in it. Okay, unemployment, they're even with everybody else, and house prices, they're not the lowest in house prices. You know, Grimsby is over 100k cheaper. So I'd say the argument, there is no argument. There's not much of a difference. The only real difference there is there may be a case of there aren't the jobs in Hull, which means people are travelling away, you know, whether they're going somewhere in north, south or west Yorkshire. They might be going into County Durham, or they might be going into Tyne and Wear. They might arguably be going into Lincolnshire, even though there is a problem with employment in Lincolnshire as things stands. Okay, so I hope this answers a few questions, but for now, thanks for watching, and we'll speak to you again a bit later.